And part of another thing that you try to do is you want to destroy, you want to break down your opponent, the so-called entropic warfare. You want to cause friction. You want to make Americans start to see each other as the enemies. And that is where the groups like Code Pink, the Tides organization, and go back to Black Lives Matter, Antifa. Well, this goes back, the Chinese connections go back to the 60s with the Black Panthers, if anyone bothers to look. Michael Waller from Center for Security Policy does excellent work on this. But the Chinese connections are there, and you just have to look at it, but think of the harm that has done. When you have Americans really starting to hate each other, when you have American cities in flames, well, how much better does it get from the Chinese perspective? And once again, they haven't had to, deploy the military to do this at all. Now, back to the proxy examples, and there's really no limit to those. I would, in fact, argue that one of the the most successful ones, besides Hunter Biden probably, was actually Hank Paulson, the former Goldman Sachs executive, was Secretary of Treasury. He did more to help China build up its financial system, its economy, than probably anyone in America. And he's pedigreed, a decent guy, but the Chinese very successfully worked on him, and you appeal to American greed, vanity, naivete. And really, when there's a certain type of American, you find a lot of them on Wall Street, when they smell money, they act like a sea lion at SeaWorld who thinks he's going to get a mackerel snack, turn themselves into pretzels. But TikTok is another good example. The Indians banned TikTok in about 72 hours, about 4 or 5 years ago, after they had a fight with the Chinese up on the northern border. We can't figure out how to do that. And when you saw, this was a while back, the president of of TikTok testifying before Congress, and he was, of course, saying the things they would say. But the most interesting thing, the most telling, was behind him was a phalanx of lawyers and lobbyists, all white people, all Americans, who were there to do the Chinese Communist Party's bidding. And that is successful warfare. Imagine if you could turn all this on its head, we could do that to them. We would be patting ourselves on the back to no end. We would have far less concerns about China because we would know that they are nowhere near the military or economic threat that they should be, nor psychologically prepared to take us on. Additionally, as one outcome it's an aspect of political warfare, I mentioned drug warfare, fentanyl. We talk about this all the time. It's killed well over 750,000 Americans since about 2013, and that's the dead. The wounded are many times more. So every year, China takes 2 or 3 divisions off the battlefield. Now, for us, what has the American response been? Nothing. Capitol Hill has never put any serious punishment on the Chinese for doing this. And that is successful political warfare. So getting to the Chinese it's war, to us, well, it hasn't started because there's no shooting. And all we have to do is talk to them. If we engage, negotiate, understand their position, well, we can work something out. Well, we'll discover we're wrong about that at some point when we either cannot move or that we find ourselves under attack and there's nothing that we can do. Now, another example of how successful this has been is that until 2017 in the U.S. military, you couldn't even say China was an adversary. You couldn't use the word adversary. You certainly couldn't say enemy. So it wasn't until Mr. Trump came along that finally you could say this, despite the evidence being clear for 30 years. And once again, this is the outcome of successful political warfare. So the Code Pinks, the Neville Singhams, these are one front in a multi-front war that's being waged against us.